podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com. This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott, episode 29 for June 29th, 2007, Dell Rising. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Audible.com. For your free audiobook, visit audible.com/windows. Leo Laporte here, and it's time to talk about Windows with my buddy Paul Thurrott. He is the editor-in-chief of the super site for Windows at winsupersite.com, news editor for Windows IT Pro magazine, and he also has his own blog at Nexus. You wish. Nexus.com, internet-nexus.com. The author of Windows Secrets, too, a brand new book at Vista. It's actually Windows Vista Secrets. Welcome, Paul. Good to talk to you from Wiley & Sons. We have a lot to talk about today. Vista has been very active. Microsoft's been out there doing a lot of stuff. And we're going to do something new on this show, which I'm really pleased to say. We're going to do a software pick.
By popular demand.
You're like
request.
Dell these days.
There you go.
Whatever the audience wants.
We're going to do it.
Paul will do. So
Dancing bears, we got it.
I like the idea. It's one of the most fun things of all is trying new software on a computer. So I'll be very interested. In fact, I'll start coming up with some too myself.
There you go.
I won't be as great as you, but I'll do my best.
Well, maybe you will be greater than I.
Greater than I. Last week we talked a little bit about the fact that Microsoft kowtowed to Google, bent over backwards when Google said, hey, our search, desktop search doesn't work as well in Vista as it should. Microsoft said, sorry. Yes, sir. Pardon me, sir. And fixed it.
I know.
But now there's more news.
Yeah, Microsoft made some concessions. It turns out they didn't go as far as Google wanted.
Google wants more?
Yeah, well, that's the problem when you cave. You give a little and they always want more. And, earlier in the week, Google had come out with a statement saying that, we're going to complain to the judge in the antitrust case and to the DOJ and to the states.
Which is what obviously scared Microsoft.
Yeah, but they were going to go and complain again and say, they made these changes, but they're sort of half-hearted and they're not going far enough, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I said, et cetera, again, didn't I? Et cetera, et cetera.
Et cetera, but that's just like the King of Siam. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I have a problem. Okay, so...
and so forth and so on.
Exactly. So, later in the week, Microsoft had a regularly scheduled update meeting with the judge and with those other entities. And they have these every quarter, and they're designed just to see how Microsoft's doing on its adherence, to its consent decree. And interestingly, the judge looked at Google's complaint and said, Google is not a party of the suit. The DOJ and the states are the ones representing consumers here. It's up to them to decide whether to give any weight to Google's complaint, and I want nothing to do with this.
Google go home, in other words.
Yeah, in other words, and interestingly, Google's actually came out later and said, that's what we thought was going to happen. So,
we knew that.
Which really surprised me.
We knew that. We really didn't expect any, but that's why we did it, because we didn't expect anything to happen.
Yeah. So Microsoft's concessions, which again I would admit are half-hearted at best, were apparently enough to quell any demands for them to make any major changes, because apparently both the DOJ and those states have agreed that Microsoft has, made the necessary concessions. They're going to do the right thing, and nobody seems to want to talk about it anymore. So I guess on the one hand, I might wonder why Microsoft was so quick to make the concessions, but on the other hand, now that they've done it, apparently this whole issue is going to go away. So what seemed like high drama a week ago just hit a wall and petered out, and that was the end of that. So
maybe Microsoft didn't need to be so cooperative.
That's what I think. Yeah. I think they could have. I think they could have argued this one.
Maybe they did it for the users.
I don't think so.
No, I'm trying to give them the benefit.
I mean, and I don't say that facetiously. I mean, honestly, what they've done is almost nothing, which is to say, they're not going to let third-party search applications turn off instant search. instead, instant search will run a little bit more in the background than it does now.
Oh, okay.
They're also not allowing Google and other desktop search programs to utilize those little search boxes that you see up in the Windows Explorer windows.
Oh.
Instead, there's going to be a little link, a separate graphic up there if you install a third-party search engine. So
it makes
it's just
sense.
a second-class experience, for non-Vista search programs.
But that makes sense. I mean, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. So,
I mean, that's what the complaint was from the point of view of browser manufacturers, is that IE had the inside track on Windows.
Sure.
So this is, I guess, what people complain about.
Well, I think it makes sense that Google would complain about this. I also, would reiterate what I believe I said last week, which is that, Google is its own dominant power in the computing industry.
Right.
And one might make the argument that they are attempting to extend their domination to a new market, which is, desktop-based search. So, I mean, you have it's sort of like Godzilla versus King Kong here, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that either one of these people should have to make concessions to the other. It's not like, you could ever go to Google and say, I have an idea. How about 1/3 of all your search results? You can throw those through live.com. How does that sound? You just don't see something like that happening. So I don't know. Eventually more people will use Google than use Windows, because you'll be able to access Google from, I can already, obviously, from cell phones and from other devices and from other operating systems that have web browsers. So, I mean, it's not like Windows is the only entry point to the internet.
Right. But it's nice. It would be nice, I guess, if I wanted to use a different desktop search for it to have parity, to be easy to use and easy to access. Anyway,
Sure.
It's interesting that the judge it sounded like the judge was a little miffed at Google, frankly, for asserting its rights here.
Well, it's hard to say, because I obviously didn't hear her say this. You can only read what she's said, in
I might be
printed form.
projecting tone of voice, but
Yeah, but I will say that this is consistent with her tone.
Yeah.
So she's not a sunny person,
No.
I guess.
Hey, you know what? If you had to sit in on this case, you wouldn't be happy either, I don't think.
Exactly. Right. Well, that was one of the other things. Google wanted the courts to continue their oversight of Microsoft beyond
Last thing
the
they
expiration date. I have to guess these people wanted nothing to do with that.
That's the last thing Are you kidding? So, interesting story from the Microsoft camp. And whenever I see studies, paid for by a company, I'm always a little suspicious. It's like the like the drug manufacturers saying that their drugs are very effective.
Exactly.
But Microsoft says its security is better than Linux. Can we glean anything from this report, or is it just self-serving PR?
Yeah. Well, a little of both. This time, it's not a third-party company. It's actually just
it's their
Microsoft
own
report.
Oh,
It's
even worse.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. So this is the guy who wrote this is Jeff Jones. He's a Microsoft strategy director, and he's in the security team. And what he's basically done is an update of something he did a few months ago when Vista had been out for about 90 days, dating back to that November release, not January. He published a similar report saying this is how Vista stacks up in the first 90 days compared to other operating systems in their first 90 days. So now it's been 6 months. So he's updated it. And one of the things that's interesting about looking at something 6 months in is that at 90 days, a lot of people said, well, this information doesn't mean much. 90 days is nothing. 6 months is more interesting. 1 year will be even more interesting. But I guess the takeaway was just that Windows Vista had fewer vulnerabilities overall than other operating systems, including Windows XP, including various Linux distributions. And it had fewer critical or highly rated security vulnerabilities than the other systems, in many cases by far. And it had fewer unpatched vulnerabilities than the other systems.
That's interesting, actually.
Yeah, and I think that most people can look at this and sort of say, yeah, okay, here's the data, it's reasonable, it's correct, etc. But I obviously, anytime you have something like this, you have to look a little deeper and say, well, what does this mean? And my takeaway from this is, okay, we'll accept this at face value, but the truth too is that, and this is not mentioned at all in this report, when it comes to exploiting those vulnerabilities, that's all happening on Windows. It's not that other operating systems aren't exploited; they are, but Windows is exploited far more often because that's where all the users are. The desktop users, and I think that's a reality that you need to mention as part of this, because it offsets, what they've tried to say here. The final point I guess I would add is just that, in my experience especially, you don't really have to do a lot to secure a Windows system. So even though Windows is under constant attack, and one of the most suicidal things you could ever do would be to hook up a Windows machine to a live internet connection with no firewall, no security software at all.
Right.
Windows Vista especially, coming as it does with a decent firewall, decent anti-spyware. You can put a free antivirus program on there.
I think out of the box, Vista is pretty secure. I mean, it's got a good firewall. As you say, it's got good anti-spyware. You don't really need to add an antivirus if you just are careful about what you do.
No, and again, my experience cannot be extrapolated, to the whole world. But I recently looked at some of the low bandwidth security suites that are available for Vista. Microsoft's OneCare and Norton 360,
both of which are god awful. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, they're toned down from those big, heavy, bloated suites. They're most people are familiar with on Windows.
No, OneCare is not fat. I have to say, in fact, I was recommending it, but boy, it's not very effective. No,
I guess not. And that's something I can't measure other than to say I use the thing and I don't get, hacked, and that's fine. But
no, yes, I'm just looking at AV comparatives, av-comparatives.org. It got 82% of the virus, their test viruses, which is pretty low.
Right. So my big thing is that I just don't want something that's going to get in the way. I mean, I want it to be, secure, obviously, and that has to be the most important thing. But if it's unusable but very secure,
I agree,
it's useless.
Well, and what comes to mind is Blink, which doesn't work on Vista but runs on XP, and I do recommend Blink. It's from EI to complete newbies who say, I just want to lock down a system, but boy, it is intrusive and it's heavy and it really, but it's secure. You're safe. So
the one thing that OneCare got right, and this is the thing that is being emulated now by Norton and other companies, is, well, actually, I would say two things. One is that the suite itself has to be low impact. It can't destroy the performance of your system.
Agreed.
You shouldn't notice it there doing stuff. The other thing I got right, which is a side argument, is that it looked at more holistically at what this sort of suite can do, and it does things that aren't necessarily related to security, but it does things related to PC performance and backing up and stuff like that. And those are all very useful services, and I guess are just a sidetrack from the main discussion here. But I just don't like these things. They're too big, they're too annoying.
Nobody does.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So I use
Nobody
AVG antivirus. I think it's fantastic. It's free. You can get a free version. Actually, you do have the pro version, but there's a free version. Something like Avast, also free, even more highly rated than AVG when it comes to the comparisons. These things are very effective. They're very low impact, especially in the case of AVG. And I just think, and it just seems in my personal experience, these have been enough. So I guess at the end of the day, as we would say in Britain, Windows Vista with a free antivirus, compared to any of the other operating systems, I think you're hitting sort of a stalemate there. And that ultimately, when you make a decision about which system you want to run, you can make it based on functionality and compatibility and all the things that are actually important to people, and not really have to worry about security as much. So I think the net here is that it's all a wash.
Yeah. I have to say that given what they've done to Vista, given the intense attacks they're under all the time,
right?
It's so far seems. I mean, I haven't seen any major exploits on Vista. There've been some bugs that they've fixed, some holes they've fixed, but it seems like it's not business as usual, and I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and right. So there's nothing like that universal plug and play bug that XP had within weeks, I believe, of its release. The other thing that's interesting about this is that Windows Vista is the first operating system that Microsoft created in the wake of its secure lifetime development secure development lifetime SDL process, lifecycle process, and thus it is the first system we can look at and say, are their security controls working? And I think the answer is yes. I think that we're seeing the benefits of that.
Yeah.
Secure by design, secure by default, secure in deployment, et cetera. So you can compare it to Windows XP and say, it hasn't been as bad. And certainly the environment we're in today is more dangerous than it was when XP came out. I mean, if anything, this type of software has gotten more dangerous, more sophisticated.
Well, there's more incentive for hackers to attack. You saw the FBI report. They said they discovered 1 billion botted machines, and presumably all Windows. And
Right.
I mean, that they started Operation Bot Roast trying to get these guys. And I have to say, I think that's old. It's got to be older versions of Windows. It's not going to be Vista that you're going to see. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, it's almost certainly not Vista, but I think the bigger issue, the wider issue, is that it's a certain class of users, and these are the people who are literally doing absolutely nothing. They're actively turning things off.
Oh, yeah.
They're uninstalling.
It's that Windows 98 machine that's running in the back of your office.
Yeah, exactly.
Downloading weather reports or something that hasn't been updated in years. I mean, of course, but still. Right. I'm not going to buy off on any Microsoft report that it is somehow better than anything else. However, it does. You're right. What they're quoting and what's going on seems to be true. That Vista is more secure. Whether it's more secure than Linux, I'm not sure, but certainly more secure than any other version of Windows.
Absolutely.
Windows Live has been updated. I'm still liking Live. I feel like it's the poor orphan. I'm glad to hear they're doing something with it. The poor orphan's little scion of Microsoft. What's the latest on Live?
Yeah, there's actually a lot going on there, and I wrote a piece that was sort of a look at what's coming down the line, because a year ago I'd written something, Windows Live, this is what they're doing, and here's the big picture, and you can look at what they're doing now, and you can look back a year ago and say, my God, this has really changed, and just in a year, and I'm happy to report a few things. I mean, one thing is that the Windows Live stuff comes out of MSN, and I always really liked the way MSN operated. I thought that they were able to rapidly release products and really, innovate quickly and do all those things that the Windows guys weren't doing at the time, when they were delaying Vista again and again. And when they pulled that into Windows and called it Windows Live, I thought that was going to be the end of that. And, that the Windows group, the bigger Windows group, would just crush the life out of Windows Live, and that would be a shame. And here we are a year later, and very clearly that hasn't happened. I mean, Windows Live ships new betas, it seems like, almost on a weekly basis. I have a hard time keeping up on it.
Now, where do you go to get the beta? I mean, I'm using live.com as a start page, but where do you go to get new stuff?
Yeah, the beta stuff is available. I believe it's ideas.live.com.
Ah, okay.
And you can get a list, a dozen or so beta products that are publicly available. They have other beta products that are still in private beta. Most of these, refresh pretty quickly. The big exception, of course, was Hotmail, which they took a few years to create that new version for, because it's an important product and so forth.
So now we have a live writer
for blog posts. Yeah,
that's kind of neat.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and that's what's interesting is you can go to a page like that, look at that, and you say, I didn't know this was here, and I didn't, and this stuff is amazing because they update it so often. It's very much, I think I described this as Microsoft's version of Google, and of course it is like that. A lot of this stuff is almost perpetual beta, and
I like this Windows Live for TV. It's an interface for large screen TVs. That's kind of neat.
Yep.
Whatever happened to Spaces? Is that still around?
Oh yeah, you bet it is. Yeah. Yeah, Windows Live Spaces. There'll be a new update for that later this summer.
That's kind of their it was kind of supposed to be their blogging / MySpace social network kind of a thing.
Exactly. Yep.
Exactly. It's funny because Microsoft will never get all the attention that these Web 2.0 startups get. Yet, because it's Microsoft, far more people use Windows Live probably, or Windows Live Spaces probably.
Right. And I've not seen data on that particular one recently, but the last time I talked to them about Spaces was in fact the number one used blog service on the internet already, and it was less than a year old, or just about a year old at the time.
But it doesn't get the attention because it's Microsoft. No. It's Windows.
Right.
It's not. And in some ways, it's the default choice too, because it is Microsoft and Windows.
Sure. I mean, there are good and bad reasons for them being so popular. But as they said, we have 450 million people that hit our service on a regular basis.
Wow.
Again and again and again, and it's a pretty good customer base. So, they're doing okay. But I think what's interesting is they have a long-term approach now, and they know they need to clarify what Windows Live is all about.
Right.
And I think they have a very realistic view of the future, although one of the things we never got into, and maybe conspicuously, was the search stuff. Search was always a big deal in the previous conversations I'd had with the Live guys, and that didn't come up this particular time. That might be coincidental, but I'm sure they still believe that search is integral to everything they're doing, but clearly
that's what brings people to a start page like Windows Live.
Yeah.
Search. I mean, I use Google IG not because it's the best start page. There are, the NetVibes is better and their PageFlakes is better, but
it's
Google.
They did a new version of their mobile portal, for Windows Mobile smartphones, and it's just a web-based portal. It's designed for the small screens. It has access to their most popular services. It's really nicely laid out. I mean, the Motorola Q that I use is a teeny little low-res screen. I think it's 320 by 240. This thing is actually really nice looking, and I actually sat there with a couple of friends. And we were comparing like home pages on these phones, and these other guys had these sort of custom Verizon looking thing that were just terrible looking, and this Windows Mobile thing was beautiful. The Windows Live Mobile beta, just really nice looking. So it's one of the many things they're sort of doing right now, and it's interesting. So I guess going forward, they want to just be able to allow people to access this information wherever they are, whether it's through a web browser, through Windows applications, or through mobile devices, whether they're Windows Mobile or not, and there'll be various levels of service depending on what you're using and so forth. But what they're talking about now, which I find really interesting, is the notion of software plus services suites on each of these platforms. So they'll have suites of software, for Windows PCs, for web, just web browser-based things. So if you could hit that from a different non-Windows type system, or from a Windows Mobile phone, typically, a smartphone. And this stuff will all be rolling out over the course of the year. So, they're doing it in drips and drabs, and I would presume by the end of 2007 or by very early 2008, they'll basically have shipped this, what they're thinking of as a second generation, suites of services and software for Windows Live.
What's going on with Soapbox? That was kind of their YouTube killer.
Yep, it's still there. MSN is still around, which is interesting. And what they've decided to do, and interestingly, this is one of the things that didn't change. I was comparing what they told me this year to what I wrote about last year. And the one thing dramatically that didn't change at all was their view of MSN, in that MSN is basically turned into their content and entertainment network. Huh. So when you hit things that are, Microsoft owns services that have to do with things like automobiles, the entertainment industry, movie reviews, movie show times, radio, stuff like that. Those will all be branded as MSN. The MSN portal will still be available, because so many people still hit that. And that stuff's all still there. But anything that is, a software or software service will go through Windows Live. And the other nice thing here is that the Windows Live stuff is stuff that Microsoft might previously have bundled directly into Windows. But they got in trouble for doing that kind of stuff. So now it's all optional. It's all online. There's not really a lot of hard sell going on in Windows, although there's more of that in Vista than maybe I would have liked. And you can just download the stuff you want. You don't have to, uninstall the stuff you don't want when you install Windows. So I think it's a better approach to doing this kind of thing.
Yeah. Moving on to...
Actually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, there's more. Yes.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, there were two specific, one application, one service that they announced this week, which are really interesting. I got demos of them. I don't have the beta versions. They're in closed private betas right now. They'll be opened up to a wider audience in the future. But both of them are really interesting. One is called Windows Live Photo Gallery, which is an updated version of the Photo Gallery application that's in Windows Vista. The reason this is interesting is, A, that they've decided they're going to update this thing more frequently than every time Windows comes out. B, it's going to be made available for Windows XP users as well, not just Vista users.
Good.
And C, it's a true superset of Photo Gallery. So not only does it do everything that Photo Gallery does, but it has some additional functionality, some of which was in its recently canceled Digital Media Suite, which I liked a lot, like photo stitching, so you can make panoramas, and then integration with Windows Live services, so you can easily post photographs up to your Windows Live Spaces blog, or send it via email through Hotmail, or things like that. So that's interesting, and I'm looking forward to playing with that. The other one, though, is the long-awaited storage in the cloud service that everyone, Google and Yahoo will no doubt be doing as well. During the beta, this thing is called Windows Live Folders, and they're saying that they might actually change the name of that. But this service is basically 512 megabytes of online storage for free, which I don't think is enough. But
not nearly enough. Yeah.
Yeah, you can upload files of up to 50 megabytes each, I guess. But this will be a paid service, so obviously there'll be other file sizes for different, money amounts, and I'm sure they'll up the individual file upload limit and so forth. But they're not going to talk about that until later in the year. So these are just two things to look forward to as we go forward. And it's just two examples of, Microsoft sort of thinking a little differently about things. In the past, I think Windows Live Photo Gallery especially, I guess it's conceivable they might have shipped Photo Gallery updates maybe through Windows Update or as downloads, but doing it through Windows Live shows that I think they're serious about, A, connecting these things to software services online where it makes sense, but B, updating these things a lot more frequently, which I think is really important, because when you have to wait years for the next version of Windows, that's a long time to wait for the photo experience to get better.
And that's what I always thought Live was kind of about, was moving this stuff online and ultimately renting applications as opposed to buying them.
Sure. And, this is the second time they've done this too, right? Windows Live Mail Desktop, or Windows Live Mail as they're now calling it, essentially replaces Windows Mail in Windows Vista, but is also available to XP users. So not only are they updating these things more quickly, but they're also making them immediately available to more users out of the box or out of the gate, I guess, and they're free. So that's pretty neat. And I'd say both of those applications look fantastic. So it's interesting. They're doing some good stuff there.
Good. Some bad stuff happening to the Xbox 360. I've been blessed. I'm still with my first one. It's been running fine. Of course, I bought it about a year in.
Yeah.
When it first came out, we did hear all sorts of overheating issues and so forth. But now it looks like the failure rate's much higher than anybody thought.
Sure. I've seen reports that have said that the failure rate on Xbox 360 is as high as 30%.
Yow.
And I have to say, that doesn't surprise me.
Really? Have you had them die on you?
Yeah. So two of my Xbox 360s have died.
Oh.
I had to go.
How long after you've had them? Because I've had mine now for about 6 months. Is it going to be stable from now on, or is it?
I don't think so.
So I should still worry about heat.
I think you're looking at a ticking time bomb.
No! Oh man!
But that's just my opinion. The first one I got, I received the first one before the Xbox 360s came out, so maybe October 2005, somewhere in that time frame. So this one I would say lasted about 15 months. Yeah, just about 15 months. The other one I had bought just before Christmas last year, and that thing failed within 2 months. But I have stories from friends. I have a bunch of guys. We get together and play Halo, and they're all moving to 360s. And I'd say at least half those people have had to return or have their Xbox 360s repaired.
Wow! And
this is finally becoming
DOA or later in life.
Both, but only once DOA, and the others were all a few months down the road.
Oh dear! Oh, now you're scaring me.
Yeah, I think they'll eventually get this stuff sorted out in the sense that there'll be new hardware versions of the 360 that have cooler chipsets and so forth. There's also a side issue, which I don't want to forget about because it's equally important, I think. Xbox 360s quite clearly are scratching game discs and rendering them unusable. This is something I've witnessed several times. And I can assure you, in my case, these things have been very well cared for. They're not scratching because of misuse. I mean, they're scratching because, something happens to the Xbox and you can hear it make a kerchunking kind of sound. And then you get this thing out. It looks like you took a Brillo pad to it.
Aye.
And we have one game in particular, the copy we have of Call of Duty 3. We often have to try to start the thing 7 or 8 times. It says it thinks it's a DVD and it won't play it that way. And it has all these issues. And you clean it and turn it around in the tray and eventually it starts. But these are big problems, and I really like the Xbox 360. I use it pretty regularly, but clearly there's an issue here. So it seems like a lot of retailers, and especially in Europe, are finally getting involved. There are some legal issues occurring in Europe as well. Finally, where people are looking at this and saying, this is something we need to talk to Microsoft about. So. Microsoft has been quiet, I think, because they really have to be careful about what they say at this point. If there's going to be an investigation or whatever,
you don't want a class action lawsuit on your hands,
right?
But 30%, if it's that high, that's high, boy.
Yeah. Well, within my small circle of friends that have 360s, it's certainly higher than 30%.
And I could see that in the beginning, but it's been around for more than a year now. Almost a year and a half.
Right. I think what happens, though, is, people will experience a problem. They call Microsoft support. They very quietly updated the warranty situation so that almost anyone who has a 360 can get it freely
really?
fixed. They don't have to do much. And I think what they've been trying to do is just quietly fix the issues while they work behind the scenes to, actually fix the underlying hardware problem. But this has all the makings of one of those auto recall type deals where eventually someone's going to look at this and say, this is way worse than the company was admitting to. So I guess we'll see. But this is one of those things that's heating up, if you'll pardon the pun.
As long as they don't burst into flames, I think you're probably not liable for a whole
I think I was telling you earlier, we went up the street and we're playing on we had, let's see, I think we had 7 or 8 360s in this guy's house, and it's been 90 plus degrees all week here, and just miserable. He has no AC. I think his electric was put in during the Roosevelt administration or something.
Oh dear.
And the power actually shut down twice because that's what happens. And so the second time I just said, okay, I'm done, because eventually this is going to shut down on my Xbox and just break it. I don't want
it's your Xbox. Yeah.
Yeah, I bring one over there, so I don't. Okay, that's it. We'll see you on a cooler day. I can't deal with this. So I don't know, but I just.
I think it's a heat thing. Probably, I would guess it's. I mean, it's been an overheat. Had overheating problems since day one.
Well, this. So, 2 years. I went out and visited with the Xbox 360 guys, months in advance of them releasing the system. And in fact, I want to say, no, they had actually released the design of the device by that time because they had the hand controllers to play with. But the systems they had at Microsoft were all these development units. And what they were 2 humongous Mac Tower desktops. This huge Power Macs.
It's a PowerPC chip in there.
They were G5. Was there a G5? I don't remember anymore.
G5,
I think dual processor G5s.
Mm-hmm.
These things sounded like jet engines and generated as much heat as the sun. And
that's only 2 of them.
Yeah. Well, no, that was the 2 of them together made a console. They had to link 2 of them together, so it was like a 4-processor dual, tower system.
Jam all that power into a little box.
Well, that's what I said. I said, how are you gonna fit all this junk into this little box? They said, we got that figured out. Don't worry about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And and now when people got the first boxes, the first thing they noticed was this enormous power brick on the outside of it because obviously you couldn't fit that in there. And then of course the things are louder than all get out. I mean
they are really loud,
especially when you're playing a game. I mean, it really sounds you're
although it's not fans. I think it's the CD or DVD ROM itself.
That's part of it, but I think part of it also is whatever
it is
active cooling mechanism. Yeah, it's got to be. So anyway, I like the 360. I'm freaked by the reliability stuff. I really am.
Well, I'm knocking on wood because I haven't had any problems yet. Because we don't play it that much.
You will.
Yeah.
Oh, you will.
I was watching Dreamgirls I use the HD DVD player more than anything else.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I like that. Hey, Dell has really kind of turned itself around, at least in terms of its relationship with its customers.
Right. I love Dell, and I've always been a big fan of the company. About a year and a half ago, I tried to buy a PC. I've routinely purchased Dell PCs with my own money, and I had such a miserable experience. I canceled the order, blogged about it. They tried to get me to come back, and I bought an HP. It's just the way it went. I think my problems were emblematic of what was going on at the company because I wasn't the only one complaining.
Oh, yeah.
And
I remember that whole saga of yours.
Yeah. So in that time period, they also had all those financial issues with the SEC. They eventually ousted the CEO. They brought back Michael Dell to run the company, and he basically did this real common sense move where he just said, "Look, we're gonna put up a feedback site. We're gonna listen to what our customers tell us to do, and we're gonna take the most popular ones, and then we're gonna do them one after the other." And one of the high profile things they did, of course, was start installing Linux on PCs. And while I don't think that's ever going to turn into a huge business for them, I will at least note they actually expanded the number of PCs that they're offering with Linux this very week. But they're also starting to come out with these new designs and nicer looking computers. They released a bunch of really colorful laptops this week and I think it's 6 to 9 colors. I don't remember. some crazy looking colors, like hot pink and espresso brown and all that stuff. They killed their Dimension line, which I believe they had been calling Dell's Dimensions back from the early 1990s, a long time. Lots of new workstations, new widescreen displays. They're just basically going down the list and saying, all right, what do you want us to do? Which makes me feel bad because I haven't contributed to this. And one of the things
it's unheard of, though. Who would have thought they'd listen?
What kind of company would ever listen to their customers?
You mean it's not just PR?
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, at first I actually kind of viewed it like that. I thought, well, they're in need of some good news, so maybe they'll generate some positive press from this stuff. But as time has gone on, I was looking, especially this week. They released all these really colorful PCs. Not coincidentally, they're starting to sell computers in retail stores where people can go and actually touch them and see them and compare them to other computers. And I think that this stuff is really going to help because we're reaching the point where PCs are essentially commodities, and that the way you differentiate from other competitors is to, make things that look better, have better style. It's one of the things that some of the other companies have done well. So,
where do I go if I want to? Do they still do this? This Dell, what do they call it?
Yeah.
This feedback team.
I want to say it's called Idea Lab.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm looking on the Dell site. I don't see.
It's Idea Storm.
Idea Storm.
So let's see if I can find that.
I guess I could Google Idea Storm.
Yeah, Idea Storm at Dell is let's see.
It's ideastorm.com.
Ideastorm.com. There you go.
So you don't go to the Dell site, you go to ideastorm.com. And this is where you would tell Dell what you think. For instance, sell Linux PCs worldwide, not only in the United States. 35,310 responses. And you get to click yes or no on all of these things. You get to vote.
Yep.
Very interesting.
It is really interesting. And folks from Dell are blogging. They're talking about what they're doing. They're saying, here are some of the issues with what you raised, and there's a real conversation going on, and it's really it's neat. I mean, this may very well set the stage for things that other companies are going to be doing as well, because I just think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, what a fantastic way, especially when you're a technology company, to use the technology to communicate with your customers. Beautiful. It's
kind of like Dig. You get to vote up or vote down any idea. You can also propose an idea. Here's one with 112. Now, I don't know how the point system works. Obviously, it's not votes. But this one has 122,933 points. Pre-installed OpenOffice as an alternative to Microsoft Office on Dell computers. Obviously, people care about that one. I mean, just a really interesting idea. I just...
Well, the other thing they did, too, you might recall this. I mean, last week it came out that Dell is finally offering to remove all that bloatware from PC. What a great! I mean, that I've often said this. I would pay extra not to get the junk. I understand that they're putting it on there for a reason. So I have an idea. I'm spending $1,000 on a PC. How about if I give you $30 and you just don't put any of that junk on there?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
It says, thanks to the folks in the Idea Storm community who have weighed in over the last few weeks and months on the issue of pre-installed software. Since we launched Idea Storm, there's never been a shortage of conversation and about bloatware here. Well, we've recently taken action. I just think that's great. Boy, I mean, it seems like it's more than lip service, and it's the kind of thing. I don't know if Michael Dell did kind of dial himself back in, didn't he? And I guess it's the kind of thing that Michael probably said, look, we've got to get our company back on track. How did we get here in the first place? Let's listen to our customers.
If you want it done right, you have to do it yourself.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
I think that was his, that's what he figured out.
You got to figure Michael would love to get out of the, retire, enjoy his earnings and everything. But, I guess you're right after a while.
But you don't want to leave the company in tatters. You don't want to see it, falling apart while you sit there on the sidelines and do nothing about it. So, kudos to him and to Dell for doing this. This is great. So I was just so... It's just so sad to see something like that happen to a company like Dell because they've done so many good things. It's interesting to see them really take this on and possibly rebound here.
Of course, ultimately, you can do all of these things, but ultimately you've got to have the best gear at the best price. I mean, it really does come down to that.
Right, and Dell is a huge PC maker, so they still have some advantages with component costs and so forth, but.
And
now
support,
they have to.
Support's very important. Service.
Support's always been Dell's weak point. I think
Well, not always. No, Dell used to be when it was.
Oh no, I mean lately.
Recently, when it was in Austin, and this is when I really was a big Dell supporter. And I told everybody, you should buy a Dell because there's no one does a better job of support. They outsourced it. It kind of went downhill. I hope they bring that. That was. I mean, I know that's the most expensive part of the business, so that's. That's
one of the things, Dell makes a lot of their PCs right in the United States. They can build these things, ship them out to you pretty quickly. That's fantastic. The flip side of that is after you get the thing and you have a support issue, you call and you talk to some guy in India. And again, I don't mean to, stereotype this, but I've had this experience, and I know people have had this. I know people who've called on corporate support calls and gotten individuals in India who they can't understand very well, perhaps, or obviously don't know the answers to their questions because they're going through some sort of a script. And it's just not the right way to do that.
Yeah. You can buy that Dell Gold support. Have you ever tried that?
No.
I mean, you can't. I understand nowadays when you're in a commodity market and the prices margins are razor thin, you can't afford to put a lot of money into support. I think unbundling it and saying, look, for those of you who don't want to pay for support, you don't have to, but if you want premier support, pay an extra couple $100. We'll give you good support.
Yeah, it's like any other industry. You can watch as in the airline industry as the services go through the floor.
Please.
You have to pay for meals if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, there just are no meals, that kind of thing. But on the PC world, the way they save money is more and more of this bloatware gets bundled in. The printed documentation gets skinnier and skinnier and then becomes electronic only. They don't ship the restore CDs. They give you the stuff just on the disk.
It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it gets really penny ante after a while, but support is a big place. Obviously, if you're looking at the cost of a PC from Dell's perspective or from any PC maker's perspective, I'm sure
it's huge. If you made $100 on that machine, and you're lucky if you did, one or two calls to support can eat your entire margin.
Exactly.
So of course, if you make a machine that works right the first time and people can figure out and use it right, then you don't have to pay.
Hey, it's more likely to work right if it doesn't have all that junk on there.
Ah, yes, the bloatware. Yes, good point.
How much of their support calls are due to, how come my Norton thing has expired, one day before I got the machine?
Every time.
Yeah.
I was just talking about the airlines, I was just reading, it's been a big problem lately, and it will be this summer, where planes are stuck on the tarmac for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, and the toilets are overflowing, and people are weeping in the aisles, and
just like at my house,
you can't get off. And there's a couple of websites where it documents these, and in one of them, a stewardess, a flight attendant.
Oh, I saw this.
Did you see this? She responds. Yeah. Well, if people would just not eat so much, they wouldn't have to go to the bathroom. Just consider, you might be there 6 or 7 hours. Stop eating and drinking. Oh, well, of course.
My sister was a flight attendant for years and years, and actually was a flight attendant through, I believe, just last month. She has a million horror stories of people who have demanded her to change their babies. She was slapped in the face once by a guy on a plane.
I don't envy her. That's a tough job.
No, I mean, it's a tough job. But I always like to remind her, I said, I hear what you're saying, but, you have to understand that from our perspective, flying on an airplane is one of the most miserable experiences a human being could possibly go through, and we paid to do it.
Yeah, you're the jailer.
Yeah, I mean, and I know it's not your fault, but I've also seen bad flight attendants, and it's the type of thing where you're sitting on the plane and there's no AC, and they run out of food before they get to you in some cases, or there's all kinds of. It's just the whole thing is just a miserable experience. So hopefully, buying a PC will never be that bad. But
yeah, it's always good when you think you have a hard time with your PC to remember there are industries where it's worse.
Yes, absolutely.
Worse. Hey, we're going to, in just a bit, do Paul's software pick. But before we do that, we want to remind everybody that this podcast is sponsored by Audible.com. They sponsor much of the Twit Network, and we're so glad to have them as an advertiser. I've been an Audible member for years. Ever since I was commuting down to San Francisco to do Tech TV, I'd be 2, 3, 4 hours a day in the car, and I didn't even mind. I miss it because I don't get to read as many books as I used to read. If you are not yet an Audible member and you're in the U.S., you can get a free book and try Audible out by going to audible.com/ we've got our own domain now, Paul, Windows. Audible.com/Windows. Go there, and you can any Audible book there you can get absolutely free. But one of the ways we like to make this more interesting is to pick a book. And now, what's great about everybody on the shows is everybody has kind of a different thing they like, And
my tastes are certainly.
You like the pot boilers.
Yeah, I do.
What's your pick this week?
That's true. Thomas Harris, the author of the Hannibal series of books, as they're now known. His latest book is the origin story for Hannibal Lecter. It's called Hannibal Rising. Come on, it's spooky. Is that spooky? Yeah, I actually had an opportunity. I was deciding between the book and the Audible version, and I eventually went with the Audible version.
Have you read all of these?
Oh yeah, and that's why I got it. I mean, there was no way I wasn't going to get this. Whatever. If you're not a horror fan, obviously you're not going to be interested. But I don't think that this guy gets the credit he deserves. He's a fantastic writer, and especially his very early books are among the best fiction I've ever read in my life. I mean, absolutely amazing. A lot of people are familiar with Silence of the Lambs. What a lot of people don't realize is that book and the movie that it spawned are in fact a sequel to a book called Red Dragon, which I would absolutely include in the list of the top 10 books I've ever read in my life.
Really? See, now I've seen the movies and not read the books, and I have to say, after seeing Red Dragon, I'm terrified to read the book.
Silence of the Lambs came out and was a huge hit in the movies, and I saw it, and I said, wow, this story is very similar to Red Dragon, and in many ways, actually, the Red Dragon story is better.
Yeah.
Than Silence.
Ooh, it's creepy though.
Yeah. So this book, the new book, Hannibal Rising, allows you to go back and find out why this guy became the way he is, and it's sort of a morbid curiosity and the origins of evil and so forth, and it all takes place during World War II and post World War II. So it's. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. And, of course, there's a movie. They made a movie version of it. And if you happen to like these kind of movies, the movie is actually very faithful to the story, to the original book. And the screenplay was also written by the author.
I think the movie got very good reviews.
I'm not sure about that. The other thing and one of the reasons I got the Audible version, by the way, is that it's read by the author.
Oh, interesting. Thomas Harris.
And it's pretty rare for that to happen with a tier 1 author like him. I was really interested to hear him read it, and that was one of the things that I think made it really special.
Let me play a little bit of Thomas Harris reading. This is from Hannibal Rising. So
where the swans could flee. Misha, in her excitement, dropped her bread on the damp ground. When Hannibal stooped to help her, she was pleased to dab mud on his nose with her little star-shaped hand. He dabbed a bit of mud on the end of her nose, and they laughed at their reflections in the moat.
Oh, I like his voice. It's very friendly.
Yeah, the other thing he does is he adopts some of the accents. So there are guys who are Russian soldiers or
really?
French speakers. A lot of the book takes place in Paris after World War II.
See, I don't like it when the author reads, because some authors just can't read. But he sounds like he knows what he's doing, which is kind of fun.
I was absolutely fascinated by this.
Yeah. This is unabridged. It's available from Audible.com. I see people who liked Hannibal Rising also likes Next from Michael Crichton. So I guess
interesting.
That was your recommendation last week. So
I did buy both of them. So.
I guess there's something going on here. Audible's a great way to read books. You download them and listen to them it works great with your iPod, many MP3 players. You can download it again and again. Once you've downloaded it, it's yours for life, and you don't have any time limit on how fast you have to read the book. And they are wonderfully read, and they're very engrossing. If you listen to podcasts, you're kind of ready for Audible books. So Hannibal Rising is our pick this week from Thomas Harris. But any Audible book, if you're in the U.S., you can get by going to audible.com/Windows. I've been told by a number of correspondents from all over the world that even if you're not in the U.S., this works. But not all books are available all over the world, and it's all due to publisher restrictions. So give it a shot wherever you're listening. Audible.com/Windows. That's our URL for Windows Weekly, and we thank Audible for their support of the show. I can't wait. That sounds like a good one. I can't wait to read that one. I realize the horror genre is not for everybody. No. But that's fine. I mean, that's why everybody's recommending different books. Yeah. Andy Anako on Twitter recommended Mr. Sulu, George Takei.
Nice. Well, that doesn't surprise me. But the thing is that there are certain authors who fall into the horror genre, and in fact, I think just great writers. Someone like Stephen King.
Oh, I mean, there's no question. He's a brilliant writer who is.
You haven't read The Stand. You haven't read one of the greatest books ever written. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's sad because he is labeled as a genre fiction writer, but he's really one of the great writers of our era.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff that isn't fantastic too, but he's written enough that he's written so many good books, and ignoring him because he's a horror author is just a huge mistake.
No, he's the Dickens of our century. Absolutely.
There you go.
Hey, let's get on to your software pick. We're going to start doing this too, and I think this is a great idea. We do it on Mac Break Weekly, and it's very, very popular. Mm-hmm. I didn't pick anything because I didn't know we were going to do it, but I'll pick something for next week. What are you picking?
This is just a small thing, but it's one of the things that was neat about previous versions of Windows is that as they were released, Microsoft came out with these freebie tools called Tweak UI,
right?
And versions for each of these operating systems did little tweaks to the UI as suggested by the name. They have not released something like this for Windows Vista, and there are third-party versions of Tweak UI, and we can look at those in the future. But one of the things I was looking for just today was a way to remove the little shortcut overlay, that little arrow in a square.
Oh, yeah. Tweak UI used to do that on Windows 98. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually had to look back to figure out why I didn't have that functionality. I thought it might have been in folder options, and I was looking around in Vista, and I was saying, I know you can do this. How come I can't?
Registry, yeah.
It turns out it's a Tweak UI feature. So in a really small utility for Vista, it does three. It has three options. It basically can remove those. Those are called icon overlays. It's like a little icon on top of the icon, I guess. The little square thing in the corner.
Yep.
They're not always an arrow. In the case of shortcuts, the overlay is an arrow, but there are other kinds of overlays. You might see in Windows, for example, if you have a shared folder, there'll be a little picture of a couple of people in the overlay. There are different overlays, but obviously the shortcut one is the big one. So this tool is called FX Visor, also known as the Vista Shortcut Overlay Remover. And basically it's just a real small one window application. You've got three choices. You can leave the overlays on, you can turn them off, or you can turn them on and they're less visible. They're tuned down so that they're not as opaque. And you have to log out, to get rid of it. But I needed this because I need often to take photos or screenshots of icons. The icons in Windows Vista are humongous, and you can display them in extra large mode, but then they have this little square on them, and you can't get the whole icon. So I use this tool to to turn it off, and some people just don't want them. Maybe you have a bunch of things in your desktop, and they're shortcuts to places on the network or elsewhere in your hard drive. You just don't like the arrows, whatever reason. So there is a complicated URL to get to this place, but actually the best way to find this would be to use the search engine of your choice and just type in FX Visor, all one word, FX VISOR, and the first result will be the URL where you can find out about the tool and download it and get rid of those arrows if that's what you want to do. Yeah,
I'll put a link in the show notes as well. But Google's always good for these kinds of things. FX VISOR. You inspired me. I thought of one when you started talking about Tweak UI. Microsoft, when they bought sysinternals, Mark Rusinovich's security company got a bunch of great free programs, and I don't know if people are as aware of these as they are of the Power Toys, but there are some. If you go to Microsoft.com/technet/sysinternals, or you just Google sysinternals, you'll find. I mean, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of these great programs. There's the Rootkit Revealer, which we first became aware of with that Sony Rootkit. We'll find rootkits. The one I was going to recommend is called Auto Runs, which is. Have you tried that?
No.
It's a replacement. Boy, I tell you, when people started talking about MS Config. And I remember we first started talking about that, I think probably Windows 98 or maybe even 95. But once we started talking about that, everybody and their brother, that was it. Oh, start run MS config, and people were messing with that. They needed a way to control what's starting up in Windows, and there's so many different places that startup files can be hid. Well, MS config is still around, but it doesn't really do the job as it used to. I recommend this as a replacement. It's Microsoft distributes it. It's called Auto Runs for Windows. And it is it knows about every possible startup location, the registry, the startup folder, run and run once in registry, everything you could want to know. Plus, it tells you more about the program that msconfig did, and it gives you the option to disable, enable, have sets. It's very, very powerful. It is a Process Explorer, and you can use it with Process Explorer and really find out what's going on in your system.
Process Explorer is the big one, and I had heard and I'd hoped they were going to put that into Vista.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because, you've got these DLL containers that can, contain other EXEs, and you have no way of knowing what's in them in Task Manager, but, Process Explorer can find those things. And, Vista came out and it wasn't there, so hopefully they'll do that in the future.
Process Explorer works with auto runs. It's the same company. It's also from Mark and his team. And so if you've got Process Explorer running, auto runs will get that information and add it to its window. I mean, it really is. These are two programs you should have. Actually, you should look at the whole set.
Yeah, you really should.
It's, it's the power toys for power users, for real serious users. So there's a couple of good recommendations, and we'll put links to both of those in the show notes. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I think this is something we should be doing every week, because there are a lot of useful tools, obviously. And actually,
this may be obvious, but if you're listening and you have recommendations for things we should mention, please
we're lazy.
Drop us an email.
We'll let you do the work. What's the email address?
My email address is my last name, Thurrott, @gmail.com. So THURROTT.
Excellent. Well, Paul, we've wrapped up this edition of Windows Weekly. I've run out of tape, so I guess we better...
Okay.
If I use tape, that would be true.
Hey, talking.
Actually, I ran out of hard drive space, but fortunately I have a backup of everything, so we're all right. We'll wrap this up. We'll be back next week to talk more about the things we love and don't like so much in Windows. Paul Thurrott. I'm Leo Laporte. Don't forget, Paul's website is online. There are two of them, two great sites. Of course, there's a super site for Windows at winsupersite.com, and his blog, which is available and really well worth reading, and that is online at internet
drawing a blank.
Thinking internet-nexus.com.
That's right.
And the book, don't forget, Windows Vista Secrets, is available from Wiley & Sons. Thank you, Paul. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, sir.